What would you do if you came home one night and discovered the two people you trusted most in this world had shattered every boundary of love, family, and human decency? 23-year-old Sarah Mitchell thought she knew her family. She thought she understood what love looked like, what protection meant, what home felt like. But on the night of October 15th, 2019, her entire world collapsed in the most horrific way imaginable. And in that moment of devastating betrayal, she made a choice that would change everything forever. This is the story of how one shocking discovery turned a loving daughter into a killer. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The Mitchell family seemed ordinary from the outside. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, where neighbors waved to each other and children played in well-maintained yards. Martha Mitchell, 47, was a devoted single mother who had raised her two children alone after her husband died in a car accident when Sarah was just 12 and her son Jake was 8. She worked double shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, sacrificing her own needs to provide for her family. Sarah had always admired her mother's strength, her unwavering dedication, her selfless love. Jake, now 21, was attending community college while working part-time at a local garage. He was quiet, kept to himself mostly, but Sarah thought that was just his personality. The family had grown closer after their father's death, or so Sarah believed. They had Sunday dinners together, celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes, and shared inside jokes that only they understood. But what Sarah didn't know was that behind closed doors, a forbidden relationship had been growing, one that would soon destroy everything she held sacred. Sarah had moved out of the family home 8 months earlier, when she got engaged to her college sweetheart, Michael. She was planning their wedding, working as a teacher, and building what she thought would be a beautiful future. But she still visited her mother and brother regularly, usually on weekends, sometimes dropping by unannounced just to check in. That's what families do, right? They look out for each other. Over the past few months, though, Sarah had noticed small changes that didn't quite make sense. Her mother seemed different during phone calls, distracted, almost secretive. When Sarah would ask about Jake, Martha's responses felt rehearsed, like she was hiding something. And Jake? He barely answered her texts anymore. When she did see him, he avoided eye contact, seemed nervous, jumpy even. Sarah told herself it was probably stress from school and work. Young men go through phases, she reasoned. Her mother was probably just tired from working so much. These were normal explanations for normal concerns. But deep down, something felt wrong. The night of October 15th started like any other Tuesday. Sarah had finished grading papers and decided to surprise her mother with her favorite takeout from the Chinese restaurant they used to visit when Sarah was a child. She wanted to talk about wedding plans, maybe ask her mother to help with choosing flowers. It was a simple gesture of love, the kind of spontaneous visit that had always brought joy to both of them. Sarah used her key to enter through the back door, just like she always did. The house was dimly lit, which was unusual for 9 p.m. Her mother usually stayed up late watching her crime shows, and Jake was typically gaming in his room with all his lights on. But tonight the house felt different, quieter, more intimate. Sarah called out softly, "Mom? Jake? I brought dinner." No response. She set the takeout bags on the kitchen counter and noticed 2 wine glasses in the sink. Her mother rarely drank wine, especially on a weeknight. And why 2 glasses? Sarah felt a small flutter of unease in her stomach, but she pushed it aside. Maybe her mother had had a friend over. That would actually be nice, Sarah thought. Her mother deserved companionship. She walked through the living room toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. That's when she heard them. Soft voices coming from her mother's room. Intimate whispers. A woman's laugh that she recognized as her mother's. And then, a male voice. Deep, familiar. Sarah froze. Her heart began to pound as her mind tried to process what she was hearing. The voices were getting closer to the door, and Sarah could make out words now, words that made her blood turn to ice. "I love you," her mother's voice whispered. "I love you too," came the reply. That voice. Sarah knew that voice. It belonged to Jake, her brother, her 21-year-old brother. The Chinese takeout containers slipped from Sarah's trembling hands, crashing to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire house. The voices in the bedroom went silent. Sarah stood there, frozen in disbelief, her mind refusing to accept what she had just heard. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Not in her family. Not with her mother and brother. But then the bedroom door opened. What Sarah saw next would replay in her mind for the rest of her life. Her mother appeared in the doorway, wearing only a silk robe that Sarah had given her for Mother's Day 3 years ago. Martha's face went white when she saw her daughter standing in the hallway. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows of the bedroom, stood Jake. Shirtless, his face a mixture of shame and defiance. The three of them stood there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of the truth crushing down on all of them. Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her mind was screaming, but her voice had abandoned her. This was her mother, the woman who had taught her about right and wrong, who had held her when she cried, who had been her hero for 23 years. And this was Jake, her little brother, the boy she had helped raise after their father died, the boy she had tutored through high school, had cheered for at his graduation, had worried about when he seemed lost and directionless. "Sarah," Martha whispered, her voice shaking. "This isn't... You don't understand." But Sarah did understand. She understood with a clarity that felt like a knife cutting through her soul. The close relationship between her mother and brother that she had thought was beautiful. The way they seemed to have inside jokes she wasn't part of. Jake's reluctance to date anyone. Her mother's lack of interest in meeting anyone new after all these years. The whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the room. It all made horrible, disgusting sense now. "How long?" Sarah finally managed to whisper. The words felt like gravel in her throat. Martha's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, please let us explain. How long?" Sarah's voice was stronger now, filled with a rage she had never felt before. Jake stepped forward, and for the first time in months, he looked directly at his sister. 2 years, he said quietly. 2 years. 2 years of lies. 2 years of this abomination happening under the roof where Sarah had grown up, where family photos still lined the walls, where Christmas mornings had been filled with laughter and love. 2 years of her mother and brother. Sarah couldn't even complete the thought. She felt physically sick. "You're sick," Sarah breathed, looking back and forth between them. "You're both sick." "Don't judge what you don't understand," Jake said, and there was anger in his voice now. "This isn't your business, Sarah." "Not my business?" Sarah's voice rose to a shout. "You're my family. You're supposed to be the people I can trust. You're supposed to be..." She couldn't finish. The betrayal was too enormous for words. Martha took a step forward, reaching out to her daughter. "Sarah, please. We never meant for this to happen. It grew into something beautiful." "Beautiful?" Sarah's voice cracked. "You think this is beautiful? You're his mother. You gave birth to him. You... The rage inside Sarah was building to a crescendo. She had dedicated her life to her family. She had chosen a college close to home to be near them after their father died. She had put her own needs second countless times to help support them emotionally and financially. She had loved them unconditionally, purely, the way family is supposed to love. And they had been lying to her, betraying everything sacred about family, while she was planning a wedding and dreaming of the day when her future children would play with their Uncle Jake and be spoiled by their grandmother Martha. All of it was a lie. All of it was contaminated by this sick secret. Sarah's vision started to blur with rage. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears. In the kitchen, she remembered, there was the knife block her mother had received as a gift years ago. The large chef's knife that Martha used to cut vegetables for their Sunday dinners. Sarah's feet carried her toward the kitchen, before her mind fully processed what she was doing. She could hear her mother and Jake following her, their voices urgent now, pleading. "Sarah, stop," Martha called out. "We can talk about this." But talking wouldn't erase what Sarah had seen. Talking wouldn't wash the contamination from her memories of family dinners and Christmas mornings. Talking wouldn't restore her faith in the two people who had meant everything to her. Sarah's hand closed around the handle of the chef's knife. It felt heavy, solid, final. She turned around to face them. Martha and Jake stood at the entrance to the kitchen, still in their states of undress, still looking guilty and desperate and wrong. Everything about them was wrong now. "Sarah," Martha whispered, "please put that down. We're still your family." "No," Sarah said, her voice eerily calm now. "My family died tonight." What happened next lasted only seconds, but it would define the rest of Sarah's life. She moved toward her mother with the knife raised, and Martha, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of her daughter's rage, tried to run. But the kitchen was small, and there was nowhere to go. The blade found its mark with a terrible finality. The silence that followed was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. It was complete, absolute, as if the world had stopped breathing. Martha lay on the kitchen floor, her silk robe now stained with crimson, her eyes staring at nothing. Jake stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. And Sarah? Sarah looked down at the knife in her hand, as if she had never seen it before. The rage that had consumed her moments earlier was gone, replaced by a numbness that felt like ice water in her veins. "What have you done?" Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah looked at him, this man who was her brother, who had been part of destroying everything pure in her world. "What have I done?" she repeated slowly. "What have you done? What have both of you done to our family?" Jake's legs seemed to give out beneath him, and he slumped to the floor, staring at their mother's body. "She's dead," he said, as if he couldn't believe it. "You killed her." "She killed herself the moment she touched you," Sarah replied, her voice flat and emotionless. She set the knife down on the counter with surprising gentleness, as if it were made of delicate china. Then she walked to the phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" "I've just killed my mother," Sarah said calmly. "I need you to send police to 1247 Maple Street." The operator's voice changed immediately, becoming more urgent. "Ma'am, are you injured? Are you in immediate danger?" "No," Sarah replied. "I'm not in danger anymore. But you should send an ambulance too, just in case she's still alive, though I don't think she is." The next hour passed in a blur of sirens, flashing lights, and shocked neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. Police officers filled the house, taking photographs, measuring distances, drawing diagrams. Paramedics confirmed what Sarah already knew. Martha Mitchell was dead. Jake was taken to the hospital not for physical injuries, but because he had gone into shock and couldn't stop shaking. He kept repeating over and over, "She was my mother. She was my mother." Sarah was read her rights, handcuffed, and placed in the back of a police cruiser. As they drove away from the house where she had grown up, where she had once felt safe and loved, she looked back one last time. Crime scene tape now blocked the front door. The warm yellow light from the living room windows that had always welcomed her home was now cold and harsh, illuminating strangers in uniform who were documenting the end of the Mitchell family. At the police station, Detective Ray Gonzalez, a veteran investigator with 22 years of experience, sat across from Sarah in the interrogation room. He had seen many things in his career, but something about this case unsettled him deeply. The young woman sitting across from him looked like a typical suburban teacher. She was polite, articulate, and showed no signs of mental illness or drug use. "Sarah," Detective Gonzalez said gently, "can you tell me what happened tonight?" "I discovered that my mother and brother were having a sexual relationship," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "It had been going on for 2 years. I couldn't process the betrayal, so I killed her." The detective had heard many confessions over the years, but few delivered with such calm precision. "Did you plan to hurt your mother when you went to the house tonight?" "No. I brought her Chinese food. I wanted to talk about wedding flowers." Sarah's voice never wavered. "But when I found out what she and Jake were doing, when I realized how they had corrupted everything I believed about family, I couldn't let her continue to exist in a world where that was acceptable." Detective Gonzalez studied her face carefully. "Do you regret what you did?" For the first time, Sarah's composure cracked slightly. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "I regret that they made it necessary." The case that would eventually be known as the Mitchell family tragedy divided the community in ways that no one could have predicted. Some people, particularly parents with children Sarah's age, expressed sympathy for her situation. They couldn't imagine the psychological trauma of discovering such a betrayal. Online forums buzzed with debates about betrayal trauma and whether extreme emotional distress could justify violence. Others, especially those who had known Martha personally, condemned Sarah's actions as cold-blooded murder. Martha had been well-liked at the hospital where she worked. Her colleagues remembered her as compassionate, hardworking, and devoted to her patients. How could the same woman who saved lives at work be capable of such a violation at home? The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Torres, argued that regardless of what Sarah had discovered, murder was never justified. "We cannot live in a society where people take justice into their own hands," he told the jury during opening statements. Sarah Mitchell made a conscious choice to pick up a knife and take another person's life. That choice makes her guilty of murder in the first degree. The defense, headed by attorney Lisa Chen, took a different approach. They didn't deny that Sarah had killed her mother, but they argued that the extreme emotional distress caused by discovering incest between her mother and brother had temporarily rendered her incapable of rational thought. This was not premeditated murder, Chen argued. This was the reaction of a young woman whose entire reality was shattered in an instant. She was confronted with a betrayal so profound, so fundamentally wrong, that her mind simply couldn't process it rationally. Psychological experts testified for both sides. Dr. Amanda Foster, a specialist in trauma psychology, explained to the jury how discovering incest between family members could cause acute psychological breakdown. "The victim experiences what we call betrayal trauma," Dr. Foster testified. "It's not just the shock of the discovery itself, but the realization that people you trusted completely have been living a lie that violates your most basic understanding of family relationships." But Dr. Robert Kim, testifying for the prosecution, argued that even severe emotional distress doesn't excuse murder. "Many people experience traumatic discoveries without resorting to violence," he told the jury. "The defendant made a conscious choice to arm herself with a knife and use it against another person." The trial lasted 3 weeks, and every day the courtroom was packed with observers trying to understand how a normal family could spiral into such tragedy. Jake never testified at the trial. He had been arrested and charged with incest, but he accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He never spoke publicly about his relationship with his mother or about the night Sarah killed her. Some people wondered if he felt responsible for Martha's death. Others questioned whether he truly understood the devastating impact his actions had on his sister. What do you think drove Sarah to such extreme violence? Was this a case of temporary insanity caused by unimaginable betrayal? Or was it calculated murder? If you discovered that 2 people you loved and trusted had been living such a dark secret, how do you think you would react? Could you forgive them? Or would the betrayal be too great to overcome? And what about Jake's role in all of this? Some people argue that as the younger person in the relationship, he was also a victim of manipulation by his mother. Others believe that at 21 years old, he was fully responsible for his choices. How do you see his part in this tragedy? These are questions that don't have easy answers, and they're questions that the Mitchell case forces us to confront. The boundaries of family, the nature of betrayal, the limits of forgiveness. These are some of the most complex aspects of human relationships. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Sarah's reaction was understandable, even if it was wrong? Do you think she deserves sympathy? Or should she face the full consequences of her actions, regardless of what she discovered? I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspectives on this case, because it challenges so many of our assumptions about family, loyalty, and justice. After deliberating for 14 hours over 2 days, the jury found Sarah Mitchell guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years. The judge, while acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances of the case, noted that society cannot function if people are allowed to commit murder based on emotional distress, no matter how justified that distress might seem. Sarah is currently serving her sentence at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. She has reportedly been a model prisoner, working in the prison library and earning her master's degree through a correspondence program. She has never given a media interview and has declined all requests to discuss her case publicly. Jake served his 3-year sentence and was released in 2022. He has reportedly changed his name and moved to another state, trying to build a life away from the shadow of the tragedy that destroyed his family. The house on Maple Street was sold and torn down. A small park now sits where the Mitchell family home once stood. There's no memorial, no marker to indicate what happened there. But the neighbors remember, and they tell the story in hushed voices to new residents, who wonder why that particular lot was vacant for so long. The Mitchell case remains one of the most disturbing family tragedies in Columbus history, not just because of the violence, but because of how it forces us to confront the darkest possibilities of human relationships. It reminds us that the people we trust most have the power to hurt us most deeply, and it raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of family, loyalty, and justice. What would you have done in Sarah's place? It's a question that haunts everyone who learns about this case, because it forces us to examine the depths of our own capacity for both love and rage. But this wasn't the only time family secrets have turned deadly. In my next video, you'll hear about a father who disappeared for 3 days only to return home with blood on his clothes and a story that made no sense. His teenage daughter found his diary hidden in the basement, and what she read there changed everything she thought she knew about the man who raised her. The truth about what he had done during those missing days was far worse than anyone could have imagined. And when she confronted him with the evidence, well, let's just say that some secrets are worth killing for. You won't want to miss this next story. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because the truth about what happened in that family will shock you to your core.